Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme of post-metal, which is it's the genre post-metal. There's not a lot I can do to describe this. It's just the genre. We're going to be checking out some Russian Circles today, which is a group we have checked out in the past, but it's been quite some time since we've had them on the channel. We're going to be looking at the track Harper Lewis off of the Station album. Let's dive in. Drone and drums. Got a bit of groove coming in here. So the synth kind of it shifts into its note. It does change the pitch on the beat, but the timbre of it widens out over the next beat or two, and so it always feels a little delayed compared to the very intense hit of the bass and the drums. Sticking with the eerie vibes on this. I really love what's going on with the percussion here. What? Just two chords, but it tells everything it needs to. This drummer, dude, just going off on these fills. So this is cool. We still have a bit of the same harmonic progression. This one introduces a third chord in there as a transition, but we bring back the groovy drums from the second or third section. very grounded with this alternating bass and snare. Then the cymbals kind of elevating it. The guitar is taking that energy and really driving it forward here. This large sounds. And that almost gives permission to the drummer to open up a bit here too with these fills. A little bit of gallop. Ah, that cheeky delay. They have trained us this whole time to expect chord changes on the downbeat, the first beat of the bar, and they gave it to us on the second. I mean, it's an ending. I don't know what to make of it. Alright, yeah, I mean this is Russian Circles. I haven't heard a lot from them, but what I have heard, it kind of fits into my idea of what they're doing. It's very atmospherically driven, fluid movement of ideas. It's very difficult to group this into a structure of any sort. It's a linear metamorphosis of sonic. I don't know the word I want. Sonic expression, maybe, would be the phrase. They're telling a story through atmosphere. And there are very few parts where I think the atmosphere just immediately becomes something else. There's always some sort of movement through it. It's what gives it the fluidity. It makes it feel like one idea that just keeps changing. Like I said, that makes it difficult to create a structure for it to say, this is this section, then that section. But at the end of the day, it's not my cup of tea, right? It's lacking one thing that I really value in music, which is melody. So I can appreciate it from arm's reach. I get what they're going for. I can see why they're appreciated, why people like this kind of stuff. But everything felt like a foundation without any lead to go on top of it. At least that's my relationship to it. In a sense, I could see this as very strong soundtrack music, but it's just missing that key element. What am I supposed to be paying attention to here? If there's not a melody, maybe it's part of a multimedia project. Maybe there's visuals to go along with it, or a text to read or something like that. It's missing that lead thing. And I get that's the people who like this kind of music, they don't need that, they don't want that. Just being in these atmospheres is enough, and I kind of envy that from one perspective. But that's just not what I look for in music. But enough with the subjective, let's get back to the objective. What is going on here? As I mentioned, it's very atmospherically driven, and what I find most interesting is that a lot of it is kind of driven by the drum and the bass. We have a drone at the beginning of the track. I think it popped up in a couple other places, but if it was kind of stuck beneath the guitars and the bass and everything else, taking up a lot of space. And it was something that I just kind of heard on the periphery of my hearing. That's a weird phrase. And I'd kind of pick it up every now and then. I'd be like, wait, is that the drone from the beginning? So I'm not sure if that was actually going through the entire time or not. But the drums give us the beat, the metronome. Sometimes it's something very simple like alternating quarter notes of bass and snare. Other times it's a bit more intricate. There's some really cool hi-hat and ride cymbal work in this track. We also have the plethora of fills all over the place that are super intense. Really love some of the metric modulation we get in those moments. But aside from those, it's a pretty rigid percussion pattern, rhythm pattern that we get from the drums. The bass, though, typically either leans into this and presents the same rhythm in order to super emphasize some sort of rigidity, or they're giving us some movement. And we actually saw this quite early on. I think it was the first time the bass guitar came in on top of the drone, and it was giving us an accent pattern. I think the rhythm was the same as the drums, but the accent pattern was a little different. And it created a little bit of syncopation within this to give it some direction. What I think is interesting, moving to a atmospheric, that's the A word I wanted, atmospheric direction, is that the heavy emphasis on the snare and the bass, especially the production of the snare, which is a lighter hit than the bass. Obviously, the snare has a higher pitch to it than the bass kick, but it's kind of muffled and muted. It doesn't have that loud crack that you would hear from maybe like a traditional rock production for the drum kit. And the muffling and the muting to it kind of puts it in this grounded area where it's a lot like the bass kick in that it represents this low foundation. It's just the ground of the song. And the bass guitar comes in here and sits in the same area as well. The drum kit, aside from the cymbals and the bass guitar, create the musical foundation for the entire track. It's what everything gets built off of, and when those are the only instruments present, the song feels very rooted and grounded. The atmosphere is present. We are not going anywhere. It is just heavy and palpable. But we do have one other instrument that shows up. That's the guitar. The guitar doesn't do riffs. There's nothing in here that's catchy or really hummable in any way. A lot of what the guitar does is chords, and often we have a very few amount of those. Some sections having just one, some sections having two chords, where 75% of the section is just one chord. And we usually have the last chord in the last quarter of a phrase. So we might do 3 bars of one chord and then 1 bar of the other chord. And it just creates that moment of contrast and tension to bring us back down to our original chord. It's almost like a drone, but they didn't want to go full drone, so every once in a while we change the tone. But it is a rarity. Like I said, in those sections, it's only 25% of those moments. It is all about crafting that atmosphere. No licks, no runs, no riffs, just harmony. And harmonically, the guitars don't really do anything that the bass wasn't already. I wouldn't say that the guitars have ever entered into a section on this track, and my immediate thought is, oh, that recontextualizes things. What I thought was maybe a bit of an eerie sound, now that we have this new chord progression in here, feels optimistic or sorrowful, or whatever. No, the guitar always continued to showcase exactly what the bass guitar was already doing. It might expand upon it a little bit, but we're not talking about recontextualization. We're not talking about bringing in any new harmonic ideas. It just brings in more. But on the production side, this is where the guitar, I think, shines, and that the guitar tends to feel very full And when it's gone, the atmosphere feels a bit empty. Again, we have that foundation on the bass and drums. The guitar fills in all of the space above that. And so they can remove the guitar and allow something to just feel static, to just feel there, like the stage of that a play would be done on. Without the stage, the play would seem kind of awkward. You don't have the curtains for scene changes, and they're on the same level as the audience, and they're not raised up a little bit above. There's a lot of oddities about that. But you don't really pay too much attention to the stage either. It's kind of an expected part of watching a play. And that's kind of what happens here. The bass and the drums rarely do anything that draw my attention to them. Aside from those drum fills, wild stuff. The guitar is what sits above that and allows direction and momentum to be presented. It's what fills a majority of the sound sphere. And I think it's interesting that when the guitars aren't present, that is when the drums and the bass are at their most dormant. It's when they're moving the least amount. I even mentioned this towards the end of the track when I had pointed out that quarter note alternating bass and snare idea on the drum kit. It wasn't until the guitars came in and started to give the song momentum and energy that the drums began to ramp up their fills, to actually include fills at all, any sort of metric modulation. That's when we brought in some cymbal work that started to give the song rhythmic direction. I think I said something along the lines of the guitars have given the drums permission to open up a little bit here as well. Yeah, without the guitars, the song stops. It just ceases to move anywhere, and I find that to be an interesting element to the track. Now, if these three instruments have these roles, foundation and everything else, what are they doing with these roles? What is the purpose of all this? And honestly, I can't really tell you. Atmospherically, all of this is supposed to represent something eerie, I think, at the most baseline, maybe antagonistic in some moments, but not all of them. It is a sinking feeling in your stomach because of something you saw in the periphery. No immediate danger, nothing looks out of place or wrong, but something keeps catching your eye. When you look in that direction, there's nothing there. But your anxiety keeps rising because you keep seeing these shadows at the outward edges of your vision. That's what the song feels like to me. It's consistently tense, but never overbearing. It never really leans into the idea that there is anything amiss. There is one section in the middle of the song I would say is the most heightened the tension is in the track. The drums are going crazy. They're putting a drum fill at the end of every 4-bar phrase. We have metric modulation in here, which is where the drummer's just introducing triplet feels against the straight eighth ideas that we have present in most of the track. The chord progression is at its most moving, more than 2 or 3. We actually have 4 chords here. They are leaning into a ton of tension, lots of, not dissonance, but just increased anxiety in the progression. Of course, we have the soft resolution at the end of the chord progression, but it never reaches a full resolution where the tension is totally diminished either. This, I think, would be the most antagonistic moment of the song. It's where the tension feels most palpable. It is, in my figurative metaphor, where you might actually see the danger for a moment. But it doesn't stick around. We reach this peak, we sit in it for a second, and then the song basically bottoms out completely, coming back to nothing before building up again, but never quite hitting that same peak. The danger is once again on the periphery. And the song ends with just some drumming. I still have no idea how to interpret that. And honestly, I don't know what all of this means either. Again, it feels like something that would work really well in mixed media. I could see a short film put to this that would work very well. Short story, a little novella. That would be harder to time, but whatever. I can even hear melodies on top of this. I don't know if I've talked about this. We actually discussed it a little bit on this weekend's live stream. That I just always have music in my head. I can't really help it. It's one of the reasons why when we get done with a reaction, I move into analysis. Some of my comments are actually, it's not what I would have done. I would have gone in this direction. It's because that's literally what my brain was doing while I was listening to it. And that happened during this song as well. I was singing melodies in my head on top of most of these sections because my brain thinks the song needs melodies. Like, I wish it was something I could turn off and just enjoy atmospheric music, but it's not the way my brain works. Um, and so, like, I could see this working well with a lot of stuff. Again, if you enjoy this standalone, you just really like this kind of music, there's nothing wrong with that. And like I mentioned earlier, I even kind of envy that a little bit. You have a skill in listening to music that I don't. That's pretty cool, you know? We always envy what, grass is always greener on the other side kind of deal, right? But yeah, I mean, this is a very cool foundation. There's a lot of neat ideas in here. I love the atmosphere. I don't get it. And part of that also is that I just don't hear the story that goes with this. I think it's cool, this rising and lowering eeriness, tension presented throughout. I think it's awesome the way that they use the instruments the way they do. It's just it feels like 75% of a whole. It's just missing something else to go with it. Without lyrics here, I'm just going to wrap the video up. These are just my thoughts, my opinions, my perspective. What are yours? What did you think of Russian Circle's Harper Lewis? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you just want to give me your perspective on this track, how you interpret it, your relationship to it. Put all that stuff down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for this one. We do have a video coming up next. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. Till next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.